Simon, hello. Good
Hello.
evening.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Marcus.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
What's happening, Marcus?
Who, like
Hey.
all of us or just some of us? All of us.
Yeah, there. I think we need to just, let's do some small talk and wait for a few more minutes. I guess there will still more people. Very nice to see you. Like, this is the first event of the year, first proper event of the year, and I'm really happy that so many people are showing up. And there's I gave you the opportunity to also pay for this, which is great, like many of you did, and I thank you, a lot for this. This is just wonderful. And so since I don't want to dive right into the topic of the night, so how have you been? Everybody okay? Healthy?
Living the dream.
Healthy.
Yeah, healthy and well.
Good. Yeah.
Staying healthy, quarantined.
Yes. Yeah. Like it's even stricter here now in Germany. Like tomorrow, we have to wear special kinds of masks in supermarkets and in public transportation and stuff. So it's quite something. And we don't. There's no daycare for the baby, and that has really been a problem for us. Yeah, but anyway, I guess we'll just have to deal with it. And okay, great to see you. And so the topic is sort of like one of the most requested, really. And first of all, thank you for trusting me also that I can talk on this, because I have been an improvising musician for 30 years now. That was when I joined a group at my university, and it was called the Chaos Orchestra, so Chaos Orchestra, and it was a free improvising group. Sometimes we were only 2, 3, 4, but also sometimes 20 people improvising together. And even before I developed a discipline of practicing my instrument, I was an improviser. And it's kind of interesting that I really come from that place, and I have sort of become so obsessed with doing structured music as well. So I kind of I know both sides of the coin, let's say. And so the purpose for this meeting today is to have sort of an open discussion. And obviously this is also already like some sort of lecture from me also about what. And let's just, for this time being, just talk about musical improvisation, okay? Obviously, improvisation, or the skill of improvisation in a general sense, we can apply to anything, right? So, but maybe just let's start with musical improvisation. So what do you understand, or how would you define improvisation in a musical context, and what questions do you have about it?
Well, I guess I can start. I would define improvisation as playing something spontaneously that was not written or orchestrated beforehand, following the music or not following the music as the moment dictates. And my difficulties with improvisation are when to knowing to break out of forms like scales and things like that, and when to add in notes or bends. So there's my first effort.
Yeah. Mark, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I tend to view it as being away from the melody. And I did take Trey's first class this year on melodies, and it was very interesting to me. And I don't really think I'm competent in it yet, but I find that I'm able to improvise much easier in jazz modalities than I am in rock modalities. And it comes very comfortable to me in jazz modalities, but I don't, but I see it moving away from what's expected, but still within the boundaries expand, but there's still some constructs, you know, that make it melodic and be appealing. Moving outside of the appealing, for me personally, is less musical, I guess. I don't know. That's just my take.
Yeah, I mean, the question is like, or it's very personal what you find appealing, right?
Hmm? Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to also discuss the difference between improvising with others when you're reacting to other musicians versus being a solo performer improvising where it's all in your head, how you're reacting to what you do next.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think there's a distinguishing factor with regard to two types of spontaneous playing. Jamming, in my experience, is one item where you're not necessarily composing, but with improvisation, there's a compositional element that's going on in real time.
Yeah, Jerry, interesting, right? But here we hear that there are, like, you could see, like, you know, different people have different definitions of what it really is. Like, you know, some people would say, if you're, you know, it's like there are like all these nested levels, let's say, on which one can improvise, right? You could say, okay, now I play the melody softer, you know, and that could be already an improvisation. Just, you know, you play the same thing, but you decide that you want to play it softer, you know, so you don't really, you can still stay within the form, the given form, the melody, and you can already improvise with that, with the sound, with the dynamics, etc. Right? Yeah, Neil?
I like to look up words and their etymology. This word improvisation comes from a Latin improviso, unforeseen, not studied or prepared beforehand, and also has this sense of not foreseen and unexpected.
Yeah. And again, if we apply this to not to music, right, where music is something rather concrete in that sense, but to general our daily lives, to me it sounds like it's something we do all the time anyway, right? I mean, everything's unforeseen. Like, even like this next millisecond is unforeseen. I'm not a clairvoyant, right? So in a way, we're dealing with situations of having to improvise all the time. Yeah, but what does that mean in music? Wolfgang, did you want to say something?
Yes, for me, for a long time, improvising was the same as soloing, and only just recently I thought that this is a big difference. but I'm still trying to figure out how to really define each side and where to draw the border. But I feel this for me now. I differentiate between both. Yeah, without the necessary clarities yet. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because when I think of improvisation, I never think of soloing. I just don't. Okay, what else?
Well, you know, is all creation improvisation, or is all improvisation creation? I mean, you can go back both directions with it. And comes to the solo issue that Wolfgang just mentioned. You know, you can focus to create a solo that may not be improvisation, but improvisation may be spontaneous creation. But does it require that momentary gesture?
Yeah, what do you think?
I was going to say, to springboard off of that, I remember somebody once mentioned to me, actually, that composition is essentially improvising very slowly. And that kind of stuck with me. And I'm not sure that I completely agree with that, but going the other way, you could think about improvisation as being composing very quickly. So in a sense, it could be kind of like, like two ends of a spectrum.
Yeah, I just spoke to Barry Cleveland for an upcoming podcast, and he said something interesting yesterday to me. He said, like, the amazing thing about music as a carrier for improvisation, let's say, is that you can go from nothing to something instantly, right? And I think that's also something that appeals to me. Like you just need to dare to make a sound. And maybe even before the sound, it's just the movement. You're just the action of touching the instrument somehow. And making a sound. It doesn't have to be an instrument. It's just even like just me talking to you guys, or you talking when you're saying something. That's an act of improvisation, right? And also there are different modes, right? Some people, I don't know, some people say that they talk without listening to what they say. Which maybe is true. Like, but for me, the way that works for me is that I hear myself before I talk, and I also hear myself while I talk. And it's almost as if the words that come out of my mouth, they fill the air around my head, and then they meet my ears and my eardrums, right? And it's yeah. Okay.
You also don't waste a lot of words, and maybe that's why, because you're paying attention to what you're saying. The observation I was going to make is that there was an earlier idea about improvisation being reaction, but I guess my question is, it can't all be reaction. Is there an action? Is there an implicit leader or something that would then maybe help trigger it? That to me, everybody can't be reacting because something has to come first, even if it, to your point, it's somebody moves or does something. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good question, right? So, and then you could say, like, how do I start improvisation?
Right.
That's really what it comes down to then, right? Okay. Any other questions, ideas? Yeah.
Marcus.
Yeah.
I think many topics have been not covered, but presented, during this introduction. There are many things to talk about. I think one of them is the difference between improvising in a free-form context, like you said in the beginning. I've never been comfortable with that. I've been more into structures and things, but that's not the point. The point is, I think that the thing about language, oral language, the normal thing, and music, sometimes it's very squared, And I heard, there's many things about Zappa now, Frank Zappa, because of his documentaries and everything, And once he told that, well, why do we really talk in 4/4 or 3/4 or 5/4? Oh, there is something happening.
Yeah, it's off now.
Okay.
Just go ahead.
Okay, so what he pointed was that improvising or soloing or playing was like language. There was not a timing in that, So you could be just talking and not thinking about the rhythm of your talking or your inner structure. You could just say blah, 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 and this could be a 5 or a 7 or an 11, but this doesn't matter. I think it's a little bit related with what you were talking earlier, that you could be in any time signature or in any form. If you have something to say, if you have a phrase, That's all.
Yeah. Very good. What else?
It's a matter of creation, of not knowing what when I start to improvise, what comes out. It's being surprised constantly. And one of the most difficult experiences I had was an free improvisation workshop with 5 other musicians you were not supposed to do structure. You were not supposed to be gentle to each other. You were not supposed to play anything that sounded good. And it was you learn how to state yourself in a context that is hostile in a way, because it doesn't sound good. It's very difficult to listen to if you're not in that. You can't listen to that. But it's a matter of stating and expressing yourself in a very fundamental way, and I take that into my improvisations.
Yeah, very, very good point. You know, it can be hostile. Yes. Yeah. You can even be hostile with yourself if you're just improvising alone, even then. Okay, I see that, you know, quite a few people here, or at least a handful of people who are studying with me. And some of you also, we also do improvisation together, right? So it's really, I find that improvisation, or this word, really, it describes something that is really very, very hard to capture. Especially like if we say, okay, why do some people, like Hugo said, like he doesn't feel comfortable improvising freely. Jens Christian said, you know, like it wasn't, he didn't feel, you know, comfortable in this hostile environment where people were just playing whatever they wanted, and that seemed like there was, you know, it was not something to enjoy, or where you're not even were expected to repeat yourself, which is sort of like the definition of what some people call free improvisation, where the aim would be not to repeat yourself. So again, there's like a rule there, where then we could say, okay, in how far is that free really? Okay, we're applying. So then it's like free improvisation is sort of a genre, for lack of a better term there. So what I wanted to say is that I think that the idea of improvisation has a really, it's quite a psychological thing within the community of musicians, right? Because like improvisation, if you think about it, it's very easy. You just do it. Well, you just improvise, right? So like then the question is like, how do we practice improvisation? Okay, you practice improvisation by improvising. And like, how do I practice playing the guitar? I practice the guitar by playing the guitar. And it's sort of like but it gets less and less tangible in a field that is called improvisation. Like really, how do I do that? How do I improvise? And there's really this very, very important you know, aspect of what Tom Paine said, right? Somebody has to start. So there is that initial action that is very, very important, right? And then you could say, okay, so in a way, this initial action, if that's all that's necessary to get started, which we know is true, right? Then the question is, okay, why do we, and I'm just talking about like everybody, why do we then sometimes or quite often procrastinate? Right? That's really what it is. Like if we don't feel comfortable, we don't really dare to play that one note that starts the improvisation, or like some others are already playing and we don't know which note we want to play, or maybe we're not even expected to play any specific note, but somehow there is this and this is what I want to kind of like ask you. So what do you think are the requirements to be an improviser, if at all? Like what is being required of you? And you can just, create like any scenario here. Like Mark said, for example, in jazz improvisation, right? What are the requirements to improvise over a jazz tune, for example? Then we already talked about free improvisation, but there's also like jam, you know, like jamming, as we said, and lots of other genres, you could say, in which improvisation takes place. And what are the requirements? Can we just kind of collect some of those, please?
I would think that a higher level of attention and focus and concentration is an initial requirement for you to be in a place to improvise.
Yes, it's great, Jerry, right? But you could also say it's the opposite. Well, maybe it's the exact opposite that's required, right?
Oh, yeah, that could make sense to me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
I would say that the being able to listen would be something that's required. If you're improvising with other musicians, you have to be able to listen to what they're playing, hopefully, and listen to what you're playing. I think that would be kind of even if you're improvising on one note, you know, just being able to hear that, I think, would be important.
Yeah, yes, that's great, Jonathan. Yeah. And there we are, you know, it's as no, but maybe we're already a step further if we say that, okay, we should be able to listen, right? So it's not just about starting, it's not just about doing anything, it's about doing anything and having the intention to actually pay attention to what is happening or what comes out of what we do, right? So what are the consequences or the results of our movements? Yeah.
Just looping.
Yeah. Just looping what?
Well, it's about looping. You listen, you react, you give your feedback, and then it's like a loop in a way. Or there can be several types of loops actually generated, but somehow it's a looping and developing a loop, whatever that means. That can mean a lot of things, but
yeah, and you know, in a way, I've already given that example of like we can talk, and the language fills the room, and as I speak these words, I hear them. I really hear them. Right now, I say right now, and I say I, you, and I actually hear what I'm saying. I hear it. I have these in-ears here, so it's not the same. But normally when I'm just, you know, my ears are open, you know, and I say something, I actually hear it. I hear it. As a psychologist, I can tell you, like one of the most powerful exercises I can give to people is just to ask them to imagine the words coming out of their mouth like this, and they go around the head, and then they go back into the ears, right? And quite a lot of people, just by, you know, becoming aware that sometimes you could actually be aware of hearing what you're saying, changes them completely over time. Yeah. So yes, feedback, right? Feedback. And like that means, okay, playing a musical instrument. Yeah, just pay attention to what the note sounds like. Yeah. So, but then you could say, okay, improvisation, but I should be doing the listening also when I practice like my chromatic exercises on my instrument, right? So the listening is not exclusive to improvisation again. So there is more to it, right?
I wanted to, this all kind of reminded me of some.
Luke, can you turn down your microphone? It's distorting. In the Zoom settings, there should be a level control.
Or just back away from your mic a little.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not finding it. I don't know why.
Okay.
Is that okay?
It's okay.
I was going to say it reminded me of John Cage, and because a lot of the pieces that he wrote were, of course, indeterminate, where it's not prepared in advance, it's not known in advance what it's going to end up sounding like. In particular, I'm thinking of one piece where it was played on 12 radios, where the performers are instructed very specifically to turn the dials on the radios at certain times in certain ways, but the sound that's produced is, of course, not predicted in advance at all, because who knows what's going to be on the radio at the time. But it's, of course, not improvised at all. And you're not even really listening and reacting to the sound, because it's all determined in advance what you're going to do. And so I think a really important part of what improvisation is that it's deliberate, and it comes from, human beings making the decisions about what's going to happen. If you have a robot that just generates sounds randomly, it's not improvisation at all, even though you have no idea what it's going to sound like.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's listening and choosing how to react. So instead of executing a score where you're trying to narrow down an execution, improv is like expanding which fork am I going to take in reaction to what I just heard.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily a conscious process. It can be an automatic process in a way, with a different level of consciousness. So the decision is not always that clear. Sometimes something is taking the decision, but it's not necessarily a conscious decision, no?
Yeah. What I find fascinating about what Luke said is, like, he spoke about the robot, right? Somebody has the microphone open. Can you just make sure you close your mics? Oh, okay. So Luke said, like the robot, right? So the question would be, can a human being ever be like a robot, right? That really is the question, right? Which would mean, like, that we as human beings, like any action we do, anything we do, has some sort of meaning and intention, even if it's unintentional. Because I don't think there is such thing, in improvisation, what you do does not even have to be intentional. I think that already would narrow things down too much if you say everything has to be intentional. Yeah. And then Chris, what you said about the like which fork to take, right? So there you go, and you could say yes, but then you could also say you could roll dice, and the dice could tell you which fork to take, and that's what John Cage did. And so that's why the piece that Luke described, even though it may sound improvised listening to it from the outside, because there's two levels of content, right? There's the sound that comes from the radio, which is random, you could say, but then there's a score that's composed on top of that, right? Like when, and so it's really that's why I kind of like always come back to, and I want to have more information from you. What are the requirements? What do you think could be requirements of people you play with? Even like if you're jamming, for example.
I think there's sometimes the mood of a piece, for instance, or, I think about if you're doing an improv in, like what Mark mentioned, over a jazz type setting, typically there's one person improvising at the time and the rest of the group is holding a structure down. And so you have some constraints. And I think you also have some expectations that you're not going to completely violate the mood of, I'd call it the expectations of the piece as a whole.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would like to amplify that a bit and talk about, if you're improvising in a group, it helps to know the genre that you're improvising, or know what's expected of you, even though you're playing something that you're spontaneously composing. I mean, if you're playing with a group and you improvise a country structure over a metal tune, that may work or it may not. It depends on what's expected of you. So
yeah, exactly. That's my question. Like,
I go back to the performance. Is this a performance that includes moving away from the performance in order to be able to look at improvisation as part of the performance. There needs to be a performance, by my perspective. Without that, improv is wasted. So I mean, let's say
can you give an example?
Yeah, stickmen. Let's talk about hide the trees. What if you decided to start it out completely different and no one in the audience could figure out where in the heck you were going with it? Is that still hide the trees? Does that really meet the expectation of, maybe for you it's improv, but for the audience, it wouldn't fulfill the requirements of a performance? And I'm not saying it's always a dictation that you must provide a performance, but as a performer, you are.
Okay, so that means it's about like the labeling of what you do. Are you saying that? In a way?
I don't know. If I can't recognize what you're doing, then I'm not really sure that it holds any value to me.
Okay, that's interesting, right? Like, because like when I play improvised concerts, like one of the you know, most people or a lot of people say, you know, was that they want to know if it was written, and they sort of assume it was written, interestingly enough, right? So I think just as you say, of course, if you say something, okay, we're going to play the piece that's called Hide the Trees, and some people know it and they expect to hear the piece, then improvising will not satisfy the expectation. Okay, but if we say, okay, we're in Chicago tonight and we're going to play the Martyrs improv or whatever, right? Then people, you know not to expect anything special, right? And probably that's why it's then going to be something special. Okay, but
well, I've watched Centrozone. I love it. You know, I've been in the living room, watch you guys play, and I enjoyed that completely. And I realized that's improv. Mm-hmm. That is not really what I'm talking about. It's like if you say to someone, how do you do improvisation? It doesn't necessarily start with the intention to do improvisation, because it requires a certain level of faculty that people may or may not have in order to be able to execute that.
Very good that you say that, Mark. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think you don't need any skill to improvise, right? It's really it really is about the fact, are you able to do something, or are you even able to do anything within the situation, right? And this comes down to just like you know, everyday situations where, like, maybe you're sitting at a table with people who are all just silent, you know, not talking. And then even like deciding, you know, do I want to say something or not? Or do I want to pick up the glass? I know it's going to make a sound, right? Is that something, you know? So then the question is really, am I the starter? Do I want to, you know, tip the first domino, right? And that's why I also said that procrastination, or the same, I don't know if procrastination is the right word in the context, you know, before improvisation, but you know what I mean. Like there is something that stops us sometimes, like in a musical context, from just going for it. Yeah. And I know what you mean, Mark. And in certain genres, like Rick said, you know, like of course you need a certain skill, but well, in order to fulfill the expectations. But like maybe some of you are aware of Arthur Lindsay, is great singer and free improvising guitarist, and he can't play guitar like some people would say, but he's an amazing improviser. So he plays like Latin, like bossa nova style music, and plays free improv guitar solos on top of it, which is amazing, right? So like even then, if there's like a conventional way to improvise over a certain sound, let's say, you could still break it, you know? And you could still, and so maybe the word performance that you used, Mark, I think like more what is called like action art or performance art, is sort of like, in a way, if it's free, is sort of improvisation and free improvisation. There's also a lot of conceptual art in action art and performance art. But what I mean is like this famous video of Yoko Ono, and you know, like shouting in the art gallery, right? Like, and people don't understand what it is, that it's just an expression, right? It's free improvisation. That's what she does there. It's not supposed to be a song, right? Yeah. So the question is, how can we be so brave, or as brave as Yoko Ono, and get up and improvise, right? And how can we get there? How can we make that happen for us?
Marcus,
Yep.
I'm reminded of 2012, the Sunday afternoon after you'd left for the Stickman tour. Trey and a bunch of the group were in your apartment, and they just said, pick up an object and we're going to make an improvisation. I think I ended up with a glass or a stick or something, and Tobias had his ocarina that he just got, and it was just, I think the situation of being thrown into something with an instrument or a device that you're not uncomfortable with, and then say, okay, let's go, was an interesting point on improvisation. And I think improvisation with an instrument you don't know might be valuable or extremely valuable depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. And then just imagine you've gotten over the initial hump, right? And you have your glass and your pencil, and you start banging away on the glass. And after a few seconds, or maybe even after a couple minutes, you start feeling awkward. And then the question is, okay, what do I do next? Like the more of, you know, either everybody gets into it in such a way that everything gels and comes together, but like the question is like, how do I even keep going? Like, what do I do if I get the feeling that I want to start procrastinating again, right? That happens, right? I'm sure that some of you must have felt this, right? Like you start out, you're finally getting over the hump, and then you start sort of becoming self-conscious, and you kind of like are being thrown back to the beginning. So Mark Sullivan, great guy here. He's studying with me and has asked me to help him to learn to play bebop again, but in a new way. And I think what we have uncovered is really fascinating. Mark, can you maybe describe what we did and what happened to you there?
Well, it kind of relates to what other people have been saying about stylistic expectations. Typically, if I've gotten in a room with other jazz musicians to play bebop-based music, even if there's no audience or anything, everybody involved has pretty rigid expectations of how the music's going to be executed. You know, the kind of lines you're going to play over the harmonies and how much you're going to bend the harmonies and all that. And so what we've been doing is trying to untether me from that stuff altogether, which was pretty successful. Initially just improvising over a drone, and you suggested a bunch of totally mechanical stuff to do to make me play all sorts of chromatic notes I wouldn't normally play. And by I managed to hear sounds that I wouldn't have made that I liked and tried to sort of work with them. And then the last couple of lessons we started playing over changes, so it's kind of going towards what it would be like to play a jazz tune. But there's still an expectation that I'm going to be trying to use my ears more and my head less, and that's really been the sticking point for me. I mean, when I came to you, that's what I told you.
Yeah.
I get to a point in the solo where I'm stuck and I don't get out of it gracefully. You know, how do I fix that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so more requirements.
One of the things I was thinking about, Marcus, is if you're playing in a group situation, as with Stickman, that you've probably played with Pat and Tony enough that you know when you're doing an improvisation what kinds of things may happen, and to anticipate what Tony or Pat may do, and then try and either go with that or steer it in a different direction would be something intentional you could do to change the way the improvisation works out.
Yeah, I mean, that's really maybe even a little bit related to what Jens Christian said before about the hostility in improvisation. I can only speak for myself here, but I'm sometimes quite aggressive in taking my stand, right, and saying like, okay, no, it's not over. It's not over. And this is like another situation where just imagine you're 3 people on stage who play, improvise, and 2 stop. What do you do? And yeah, I have to say, like after 30 years of making a fool of myself, I don't care. I can keep going. And sometimes if I feel like there's still something that needs to happen, I keep going. And I think that also, like in a way, that is sort of like the other side of the procrastination, right? Like where you simply go for it, and where you're kind of like forcing things to happen, which is part of what is it's a valid thing to do, but it requires a lot of stamina to do that, right? And aggression, like actual aggression to do that. Yes. On the other hand, you say, yes, once you know you're in a group and you improvise regularly, you sort of like start cataloging the repertoire that the others have, right? And I, this is like for those of you who also follow King Crimson, like like this is something that has been discussed by Robert Fripp a lot as well, that like after a few nights, or like 2 weeks when the Crimson projects played, like they started developing these ideas, and suddenly there were pieces, right? Then you had like sort of a label, you had a name for a certain sound, or a label for a certain combination of instruments, a certain way of like relating the instruments to each other. And then there we see it, like we get into composition very, very easily also with improvisation, especially in groups, right? That's why like jamming with friends, when there is like no plan, let's say, right? Usually what happens like within the first 30 seconds is that there is a plan, like that everybody agrees on, right? And it's pretty much related also to the roles of the instruments. Just imagine you're in a rehearsal room and improvising with like a trio of drums, bass, and guitar, let's say, and the bass player only plays high notes. Just imagine how awkward that feels, right? But the guy who only plays high notes, like hats off to him, right? Like that's really the courage. Yeah, in a way, we could say courage is an important factor for musical improvisation, right? Like what Mark described, and let's just quickly say. So basically, I taught Mark to be free to just play anything, like anything, really anything. So there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong. And then at some point, I allowed him, let's say, to use his ear and to correct the last note of a phrase, right? And like there are several modes of how you can correct. You can play the tritone, or you can play a half step above or below, something like that. And when he started doing that, it started sounding like bebop. Because, and this is just going back to what people say about the genre, because Mark is an expert listener, and he knows the genre very, very well. So it means the sound is represented within himself. And so in order to recreate the sound, all he needs to do is he needs to follow what his ear tells him, right? And so the question really is like, how can we get there? If we really want to be free, you need to be able to play everything chromatically, anything, all the notes on the fretboard, or all the keys on a keyboard, or all the notes with your voice. With the voice is even harder, right? And then, because you already have an idea of what it should sound like, And this is probably also what Mark was referring to, because you have kind of like an idea what the idiom is, right? What the idiomatic sounds are. And then you can basically start self-correcting and create these notes that then make the sound of the kind of the style of music you want to make. And it's very, very, very hard for people to take this way, right? Where you start freely and then you let yourself make like these small corrections to what you're playing to get closer to the sonic ideal, let's say, what you're going for. And, you know, if you think about it with jazz music, right? It wasn't, there weren't rules when they started inventing that genre. You know, the sound kind of developed out of improvisation, out of people playing together. And later it got codified. And what happens nowadays is that people, they're being taught the system, like the codified system. And that what that means is that like before we start playing, you know, we won't even want, like when people ask, okay, which key is the song in? Normally we shouldn't even be, we don't even need to ask that question. You play with any note, you start with any note, and then you realize, okay, no, that note is not the note I wanted to play. It doesn't sound good. Okay, so let me try a different note. Let me just move up a half step or down a half step, or let me go to the tritone, like I said, right? But just to having the courage to do that is something that within our Western culture it's very, very hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. Yeah.
Marcus, you made a point about when Pat and Tony were kind of done and you weren't, and you wanted to keep going. That caught me right away, because my thought when you said it was, what was it that you were doing that you felt was unfinished? What additional creative, you know, that led me to think you still felt like you had something to say. And so what drove that, as opposed to just feeling you were done when they were done?
You know, that's one way of describing it, like that maybe I still had something to say, but you could also say that what can inspire you and should inspire you is when you don't have anything to say, right? When you don't know where to go, when you don't know what may come. And I have to say that that is more attractive to me personally, just to me personally. Don't say it has to be for everyone. But like that's why, like with some of the, and we'll get to that. I mean, I'll talk about the workshop later, which is the improv workshop actually. But you know, like you kind of like need to allow enough time to get to a point where you're exhausted, right? And once you're exhausted, and then you you could say you force yourself, or you gather all your energies again to do something, that for me is a magical moment. It's like, it's probably for people who do, lift weights, right? It's like that those last 5 that are, you know, more than you thought you were capable of doing, you know, in a way it's like that. So it's not that I'm there and I say, okay, I still have something to say. I'm still going to lift like 200 kilos 5 times, right? It's not like that. It's more about the going beyond what you're comfortable with. And in a way, we're back at the very beginning of the questions, like how do we actually start improvising? Because, you know, this very question or feeling or idea kind of exists even before you start, right? Yeah. And I really encourage you, and this is like whenever you do, like try to, rather than doing 5 minutes of something, right? Then do another 5 minutes, and do like another set of 5 minutes.
So it's about finding the point when you can let go and just forget, just let things happen beyond your control.
Yeah, and that is something that can sometimes require force, right? For lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or
that's
effort.
What you were, yeah.
Let's just say effort, right?
Courage and daring to be ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, let's just because I have this huge... Yeah. So just, you know, because I have this huge catalog also of improvised music, I can also go back and I can listen to it and I realize, okay, yes, sometimes there are these moments where things peter out, right? And it seems like the energy is gone. But then if I or we keep going, something really, really amazing usually happens, right? You know, and that's kind of like this wave, this up and down, like the up and down downs that we have in life. You know, it's exactly like that. You know, and when we're down, doesn't mean that we stop, right? We don't have to stop. We keep going, and it goes back up. And it's like that with improvisation or with music and making music in general. So, but then really what is interesting, and this is kind of like the next step I want to get to here in this discussion, is, like I said, this moment of exhaustion, or where you say, okay, do I start again? Okay, when I ask myself, do I want to start again? This starting again is also the beginning of something completely new. And it's kind of nested, right? So you could break it down to into 5-minute chunks or a minute chunks or seconds, right? Or then you could say phrases or musical ideas or sounds I used with the instrument or anything that you can label, really. Like when some, like an idea exhausted, you start again, right? And you kind of start again. And this can be broken down even to like what I do with Mark, for example, can be broken down to the individual note, right? So like every single note is starting again, like starting again. And you know, this is like the wording I sometimes use is like, just play as if each individual note you play is the only note you'll ever play in your life. It's only that one note counts, and it doesn't even matter if it's right or wrong, because it depends on the context what it sounds like, and the context might change right away. So why don't you just play any note you want to play, and then just sit on it and enjoy it, right? And that's the only note you'll ever get to play. Yeah. And that's, yeah.
Now, there is something new that happened in the last 50 or 70 years, is that before that you could improvise, and as you say, it's just a moment. So you can enjoy an improvisation as a listener and see musicians improvising and enjoying what they are doing. But today you can listen to the improvisation over and over again. And if there is a wrong note or something that is displeasing somewhere, I mean, displeasing just for the listener, because that's a relative assumption. But if there is something that you don't like, or even you as a musician that you don't like to play, it's there and it's recorded. So the question is, should improvisation be recorded? Is that not something that is to be lived in the instant? And what is the importance of time and leaving things as they occur? Because that's how you live them when you play. So for the audience, shouldn't it be like that as well? Or you can say also there are wonderful improvisation, and stickmen are a good example of that you want to listen over and over again.
Yeah, so, I mean, does the recording turn the improvisation into a composition, right? Because you can listen to it again, or it can be performed again when it's transcribed or something, right? I think this whole idea of being wrong is wrong, right? It's just wrong.
Yeah. But that's okay. But I mean, if I listen to you and Pat and Tony improvising, and that's nice. But you improvise in a certain way that is enjoyable, differently than other people. And for example, me, if I start improvising, it will not be the same at all. So we can say, okay, I understand what you say about everybody can improvise and do things, but the value or the listenability or the way the listeners are receiving it is different from people to people. And you yourself, you could improvise with anybody. But if you improvise with Robert Rich or you improvise with Gary Husband, it will be different. The experience will be different.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you improvise with somebody who doesn't know anything about improvisation, it will be something else again.
Yes.
So there is a value of things. We cannot say everything is worth everything. I mean, there is some scale to put there somewhere. I don't know where, but there is something. Yeah, that's an interesting question in improvisation. Like if you take an ocarina that you don't know how to play, does that have a musicality? Yes, maybe, but where is it? Where does it lie? And that's the interesting question.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Like, what do others expect? Right. That's kind of like the question. Like, just let's take the example of the jam band. Okay, what are the expectations? Who has played? Well, George, tell me what is expected of you as a bass player when you're jamming.
Well, this is actually kind of really, I guess, to in that situation to stay locked in with the drummer, basically. Mm-hmm. I think the thing is, it depends on the situation. Like, if we take a big, take a step back and look at everything that we've discussed here, it really seems to depend upon who are you playing with, what is the situation. So, for example, like when I play with Juan and Mike and Proteus 3, right? That's all improv, and yet it's like a big Cirque du Soleil acrobatic thing going on, and I get very hesitant about, okay, is this where I jump in? Hopefully somebody's going to grab my hands, Mm-hmm. But yet when I play with that Cigar Box Blues Band, it's a very different environment altogether, Basically, my job is to kind of stay locked in, with the drummer, and I can do some stuff here and there, but not to detract from the harp player or the guitar player. So it really kind of depends on the situation and who I'm playing with. I hope that kind of answered.
Yeah, of course. And that makes total sense, right? But still, when you're playing your part, there's a certain level or a certain degree of freedom, right? Like, but as you said, like say with the blues band, you said like, okay, you need to be locked in with the drummer, and that's kind of like the thing. Then probably also there's sort of like a key everybody has agreed on, and especially in blues, you have played, if you're 12 bars or whatever, right? Something like that.
You'd think there's a key that we. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just so who of you would say has difficulty improvising music? And just if you feel like it, just say why, or not why, but just how. What are your thoughts, Matthias?
Yeah, I feel like this. I know two modes I'm in when I'm in a setting where I need to improvise. And the first is I have my inland empire. I'm improvising in my head without an instrument, and then I have the problem where I'm not really able to translate what is in my head to the instrument, to the room, because I lack the foresight. What is the note I'm looking? What is the color, the sound I'm looking for? I'm not fast enough, or I don't know at all. And the other mode is where I don't feel it. I do not have my access to this inland empire. Then I just force some patterns, and I don't care if it's right or wrong. This is much easier. And often the recipient will not even be able to find out how lost I am, because it's just you know. But the first thing is something I feel much more comfortable in. But this is obviously much more difficult, and this is for me, it's a big requirement to be able to translate. This is something I wanted to add also.
Yeah, so Matthias, does that mean that you would have like a, say, a melodic idea in your head before you play it, right? Is that, or?
Yeah, or just let's say an image.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know.
Okay, what can you describe one of those images? Could it be like? Is it like a geometric thing, or
yeah, like that, or a mood, something.
Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, so you say what you would need is like let's say the knowledge to convert the graphic representation of what you want to do into pitches or into rhythms, into something that comes from your instrument. Okay, yeah. I mean, even though I'm here like talking about like, yeah, you could just play, you just do anything and it's fine, right? But obviously, as we've identified, like there are situations where you have to, or you should kind of be respectful to the genre. It's not something I'm great with, right? I'm not very respectful when it comes to that. But yes, right? So musical knowledge is obviously good to have, always good to have. Like if you know that if you wanted to have that minor tonality, to actually know where your minor third is in the key that you're playing, right? Like maybe that's all, that only knowing that one note will give you a lot of power to express something, right? For example. So it's not much you need to know, but there needs to be some sort of, or should be, if you actually have this sort of, like as Matthias was describing, you kind of like have something that's already represented and you want to kind of like meet your own expectation, then you need some sort of, you need the skill to translate.
Very hard time with it, Marcus, and I think I know why, and there's a few things. One of which is, if you let your proficiency with what you're playing lag at all, I think you lose the confidence to express yourself well because you're not playing enough. The other thing is that I have spent most of my life playing the antithesis of improv, which is prog rock lines, where everybody knows every note, right? And so trying to break away from that, one of the best opportunities I ever had, frankly, was playing Airley's father's part in Conjunction Junction at camp, because it was a jazz piano part, and it was so liberating to actually be able to do that. So I'm thinking there's three steps. There's what you've tried repeatedly to tell me for several years. There's getting my chops better, and it's using probably jazz as the entrance to really start opening that up for me, because I'm going to have to start there where the rest of the group is doing something expected, and then hopefully maybe I can move beyond that.
Why do you think that jazz would be a good genre to practice?
Well, because there's only one of us doing it at a time versus trying to react to each other in a 70s King Crimson kind of way where the whole group is doing it. I'd be completely lost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, Tom, I grew up playing spoonful, and either trying to do the Eric Clapton part or the Jack Bruce part and the extended jam. Greg and I did that for years in 1969, 1970, and got very good at being able to play back and forth and improv really well. It's blues, it's simple, but in fact, when I jump out of that, I'm lost. Just like you are.
Okay.
So I can very narrowly do it, but I'm identifying that I have problems in other areas doing it, where it's just like where to start. Marcus is trying to give us some not rules, but some guidance. about start wherever you want, but it does take a lot to get into it.
Yeah, what does it take, Mark?
It takes opportunity. You know, I
Yeah.
think you can do it. You can do it in your bedroom or in this space of expensive keyboards I have behind me. But unless you're working with people or have the opportunity to throw ideas back and forth, right or wrong, good or bad, you don't really have the opportunity to succeed or fail or gain confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to amplify something on what Tom and you just said, is that as an improviser, I am my own worst enemy. And I discovered this a lot of the time at the touch guitar seminars, where I was surrounded by people like Trey Gunn and Marcus and a few other people that you may or may not know. And I'm going, I don't fit in. What do I do? And it's sort of paralysis. It's intimidating. It's imposter syndrome. It's whatever you want to call, but I am my own worst enemy. But then again, I'm reminded of something that was told to me in a music class, I think in the early 80s, which is play something, don't play silence unless it's intentional. So I don't know how many people feel like trying to not be your own worst enemy is part of the issue of improvisation.
Yeah,
I agree with that, but I think we have the antidote. That's Marcus, because what he's just saying is just a good antidote to this. He's a very skilled musician, very professional guy, very high level, and he's just saying improvisation is not about anything of this. It's just about letting go and letting something happen. So that's quite a lesson, I would say, and gives confidence.
Yeah, Jean-Philippe, thank you. But we also all feel it really, like how extremely difficult it seems to do that, right? To have that freedom, not to have those thoughts. That's why I mentioned like psychology before, right? It's really a very deeply deep thing deep down that we can and probably should work with, that makes us free to act in this world. And music is just, like I said, it's just one field. But music is kind of cool also, because it shows us about the perversity and the bizarre ways in which people or groups of people build the rules, or kind of like try to define themselves by things that only they can do, right? So you're automatic, and I hope you didn't feel like that, Rick, really in the group with the TGC, for example. It's like we try to be inclusive, right? But I can see that, like especially with jazz, where I don't think that it's the musicians themselves. I think it's the educational system that kind of like wants you to believe that you have to to learn scales, and you have to know which notes, which scales to play on which chord, which is total bullshit, right? It really is total bullshit. It's like improvisation, or especially jazz improvisation, has never been about that. But it's just something that was, and I don't want to go into that, but I think something that has been invented for people who are not inventive. But we can all be inventive, and we can all be inventive if we just move, right? There's something extremely physical about being a functional human being. Right? We know that, like, if we can't move, like, there's hardly anything, then but we are all in a position where we can do something. Like we have voices, right? We could just improvise, and we improvise with our voices. We can take the instrument, and no matter which skill level, you can make a noise. All of you could, right away pick up your instrument and make a noise. And that, as we said, that would be an improvisation. That could be called a composition. It depends on how we label it. And now the labeling, there's this, you could say there's like the intellectual labeling, like what is the word I assign to it. So it's sort of like a digital way of archiving the experience, but you could also archive the experience emotionally. And this is where we're coming to the really important aspect. So just imagine that anything you do, you can experience as positive. You can experience as a loving expression, as something joyful, right? And unfortunately, our good friend, some of you know him, Henry Lohman, can't be here tonight. And he's written me 5 minutes before the event that he can't be here. But he is a really prime example of a person who can really spontaneously improvise and be a wonderful person and a wonderful role model for all of us. It's sad that he's not here. Yeah, but it is possible to just reframe, is kind of like maybe the technical term, like to reframe the grief that you don't know which key the band plays in, right? Like, but we can reframe it and just play one note that's wrong, but hold it and play it against the track. And then if you have time to start to think, to listen, actually, first, if you listen, okay, that's kind of like tense, nice. Oh, but I hold it. I love the tension. Oh, I love the tension, and I love it, and I still love it. And then at some point, okay, no, like if I just move my finger up one fret, the tension will change. I don't know. It's going to go more tense or less tense. I have no idea. And I just move my finger up, right? And then I have this note that, oh, wow, that's a new sound. That's just a new sound. Oh, it's a new sound. Oh, it's, oh, wow, amazing. Wow, new sound. I want to keep listening to it. I keep playing that one sound. And then, okay, I'm bored. I just move somewhere else. Oh, wow. What is that sound? It's amazing. It's an amazing sound. And you keep holding that note, and then you just move your hand, you go up the fretboard, or on the keyboard, you go, and you end, Tom Paine ends on like playing 3 chromatic notes that are like next to each other and goes, and it's so amazing. It's so beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful. It's just beautiful. And that's how you improvise. And that's how you make music. And that's what music is. And that's what life is. That's life. Yeah.
Marcus?
Oui?
Yeah. Hello. I feel bad because for me, improvisation is easy. Seriously, I mean, I can't judge myself on the stuff I do. I'm almost my only listener to my own music. So, but all the problem you've been talking about, I don't have any of them. I don't have any, and I'm not absolutely saying that I'm good, but I don't have any of those stops. And maybe it's because I don't have any musical theory at all. I mean, I know approximately what is minor and major, but I'm not even sure. So, and maybe you've seen me at the Tree of a Perfect Pair camp play sometimes, but every guitar solo is always improvisation, and we also do a jam with people. But for me, it's way less stressful than a song in 4/4. Yeah. So it's just funny that I see people struggling and all that stuff, and for me, it's so much easier to improvise.
Yes, yeah, and there you go. It's your personal history with music that kind of like defines how you feel about it. And like one of the greatest improvisers of all time is my musical partner Bernhard Wüsterheinrich. It's unbelievable, and he has no knowledge whatsoever of music or music theory, but he is most amazing listener you could ever meet. And he plays beautiful stuff all the time. And it doesn't matter if the notes he plays are right or wrong. It's like it's just that kind of category doesn't even exist with him. And it's wonderful, Patrick, that it's like that for you, right? But then for you, and this is just because I know you, the challenge would be, okay, but what would happen if I actually knew something, right, about what I'm doing? So you see, like, I'm not, like I said, I'm not the guy who is on the one side and says like that total freedom is sort of like important, right? I would also say like total mastery is as important, right? It can be like as a starting point. I say you can do anything and you shouldn't, there's no skill required to express yourself. And if that's what you say, Patrick, amazing. And if you feel great doing that, you're really, like you said, you're a lucky guy, right? It's really amazing. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. But then you can also go further. Like there's always a way to go further in either direction. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like maybe some of you have heard of Derek Bailey, improviser, guitarist. You should really check out his playing because it's unbelievable. It's like the sound, the quality, and of what he's getting out of the instrument at any time is just perfection. But everything's freely improvised. Like, and it's absolutely amazing. Like what I'm saying, like the quality of performance, again, is something that's independent of how free you are as an improviser. It's another layer. And that's why I'm saying, like Patrick, like for you, probably, you don't need to know anything about music theory, but maybe if your technique would be like 100 times better than it is right now, your improvisation also would be different, right? And I'm not saying it has to be, but this is just sort of like the opportunity, because somebody that, yes, yeah, we use the word opportunity, Mark, right? Opportunity is something that we create for ourselves, right? And we always have the opportunity to do some work, yeah? And so some work can be, yeah, what can, you know, like, I don't want to give too many examples, but I want to just briefly mention that what I'm going to try to do, I want to offer, yeah, just wait, Jean-Philippe, just a moment. I actually want to offer a real workshop at a distance like this, like with Zoom meetings. But in addition to that, there will be actual practical exercise or work that we can do that sort of like needs to be done to see how that can influence or will influence our the way that we feel about improvising. Like maybe we can all become as good as improvisers as Patrick already is. You know, that would be wonderful.
I just want to add something about the fact that I say it's easy for me because I know my own boundaries and my own style, or you know, yeah. I would not play. I would probably refuse to play on a blues improvisation because I don't know any of the structure or the what is expected. Well, I know what is expected, but I would not be able to play it. So jazz or blues, I would not play the game because I would be way out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, yeah. And that would be the same for me. There's just a certain style or certain vibe of music that I'm just not interested in contributing. So I hear you. And it doesn't even have to do with skill. Like, I probably would be able to play something that sounds like a bluesy phrase, but it doesn't touch me much. Okay, so Mark. Well, just a moment. Oh yeah, Jean-Philippe first. Sorry.
Just it's a bit later, but I just wanted to know if you have any idea of the knowledge of Derek Bailey of the musical theory. How does that inform his improvising? Because I find it everybody is saying, oh, Derek Bailey, that's wonderful, beautiful, or very interesting. But I must say, I find it difficult to hear myself. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering whether, and I'm sure it's very interesting. And for example, if you hear him playing with, on the David Sylvian album, it's something very, very special. But does he know anything about musical theory, or is he totally free from any theory? Do you know anything about it?
I do not know. I do not know. It's something we can read up on him. But there's one thing you need to, and I know you understand, because you're making music in the same, in the same way, I would even say, right? Where it's actually not about, and I can't find the word right now. It's not kind of like your musical actions are not there to confirm existing structures, right? So that's why, like I said at the very beginning, of the genre of free improvisation, the rule is that you try not to repeat yourself. So that you could also say that the patterns that you use are very long, right? Ideally, your pattern is so long that you can improvise like 10,000 hours in your life without ever repeating yourself. Okay, and we know like how incredibly difficult that is. Just and it's about like, that's why like the master improvisers in free improvisation, they have this skill to kind of always draw something new out of the instrument. But then you could say, like, as soon as Derek Bailey plays like these amazingly beautiful harmonics again on his guitar, you could say he's repeating himself, right? So also there, it's just a matter of which scale you're looking at things. And so that's also why I believe, at least for myself, improvisation for me includes the structure. I want to be able to improvise structure. If I'm able to say, okay, yes, I remember the notes I played, and I think I've said this in another Living the Dream event, that when I did the Crimson Project opening pieces, for example, I kind of kept track of which notes I played. I kind of knew that I could come back to the theme, and kind of like I think I do that automatically or subconsciously. Like I remember the kind of phrases I played. It's not necessarily about the notes. It's kind of like the gestural expression of my movements, or of my state of mind in the moment that I play, and I can remember those and I can recall them. And like within the creation of such an improvised piece of music, I recall these different states, and I would even say I control them a little bit, and say, okay, like I have kind of like given myself into this world, into this particular sound world that uses this kind of atmosphere. So, and then really it's like where I'm restricting myself and say, like, maybe I want to stay there a little bit, and then I get cautious, right? Like in such a situation, obviously, just imagine you have, like, by accident, you've played like the notes of the C major scale, and there's a C drone going on underneath it, so everything sounds like C major. And at that point, you need to, if you want to stay within that sound, then it becomes difficult. Like that's the moment, like that Patrick described, where suddenly somebody asks of you to only play the notes of C major, and it's yourself, right? And in that moment, you sort of like, then it would be good if you can become conscious of what you're doing for a moment. You can say, okay, yes, I've realized that it's all these notes. Okay, I stay there. And I pay a little bit more attention. And maybe I have to slow down a little bit to make sure, I look at the fretboard, I look at the keyboard. Oh, what's that white key above the third black key? It's called B. Yeah, B is in the scale. Okay, I can play it. It's okay, Tom Paine, right? I'm saying this. It's okay if you take the time to to before you even play that note, and then you play it. And, you know, because that note then is in the scale, it is in what you decided on, that you wanted, you know, the framework you want to work in, then that note can also stay a little bit. You know, it's then you don't have to let it go right away. You can stay on it, and then you can see, okay, now I remember, okay, C major is the white keys anyway. Okay, no problem. So I can play any white key, and you play a white key, another one. And then maybe say, it's okay, but, you know, that's not the greatest. I wanted to sound more resolved. Let me try the note next to it. You play the note next to it, and suddenly it's resolved. And then finally, okay, now I've found the C. This is the C. Okay, this is the root. And you can relax on it. And then you look at somebody else, and somebody else takes the next solo, right? So this is sort of like it in a nutshell, right? Like how you, but as I said, like it's a very nested process. And especially when it comes to a specific genre, it can be quite paralyzing, right, to know what you play. It's of course, right? Of course.
I find that format most interesting because it's in your control, but it's out of control at the same time. And I think that genres, you know, when you start talking about jazz bands or jam bands, that's very restricted because there's an expectation, and it's the expectation that keeps you restricted. And when you're in complete control and you're improvising and you're reacting either to, you know, how you want it to change or reacting to how others are reacting to how you're phrasing or how you're speaking, that's where it's interesting. And I also wanted to equate it to language. You know, it really becomes a language if you become proficient enough in expressing in any given key, or if you're thinking in terms of music theory or whatnot, you want to get to a point where you're no longer consciously doing that. You're just expressing. And you're no longer translating. There's probably quite a few people on this call that are bilingual, and there's a point in when you're learning another language where you've stopped translating, and you're just expressing, and now you're speaking, and and then at one point maybe you're writing prose, or you're being more poetic, and that's kind of the way I see improvisation and self-expression. You know, being in total control, but allowing yourself to be in a totally out of control situation.
Yes. Yeah. So you came a little bit later, Giovanni, but I think like somebody else talked about the language thing before, and this I wanted to add something to that. Who said that about language before? Was that you, Mark? Has it? Or Hugo? Yeah, Hugo. Okay. So like thinking about that, like comparing English and German, for example, right? This is kind of like really fascinating. I'm not sure if like you guys who speak English are aware of that. In German, the verb is always at the end. Like you really need to know what you're saying before you even start the sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really incredible. Like I've only recently become aware of that the German brain, let's say, has to function completely differently. Like the inner voice kind of has to formulate the thought before you open your mouth.
Yeah.
So, and that leads to completely different way of massaging words, right? As you can imagine, right?
Certainly.
So that's why also for me, English, and for me, it's difficult even just to say if my English I mean, it's good because I can talk about these complex topics with you guys, right? But to me, it's really a completely different genre. Like here, I'm improvising in. This is kind of like a jam band style, right? Speaking English. German is probably more like playing jazz, right? In a way.
But do you think in English, or are you always translating? And is that the difference, whether you're actually thinking in that other language or translating on the fly?
I think in English. When I'm talking English, I actually think in English. Like my whole brain switches to English.
Sometimes there are even thoughts I only have in English, and I don't know what they mean in German, or I couldn't express them in German.
Yes.
Because English is the more suitable language for even that thought.
Yeah.
So
Well, we put our action up front, you know, with the verbs, and you can see where that's got us. So.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
but
blame the Saxons.
but there you go. It's kind of like an interesting insight, right? Like if we think about improvising music, then we could say that it would be good if we were able to do both, right? Like if there is a way to have sort of like the music as an afterthought, right? Which would be like the German way, or to have it more as I don't know what to use, like the flow of, right? I can even change the sentence, like what I want to say, like while I'm making the sentence up, right? That's probably more like the English language way, yeah. And so like it's really super interesting. Like I find it actually wonderful that I was just expecting, because we've already been talking for 90 minutes, but it's fascinating that we have really not talked much about pitches or scales or things like that, you know, and we do as musical improvisers, obviously that's what we have. Like if you have an instrument that's fretted, or you have a keyboard, right? That's kind of like the first, the vocabulary is the colors that are the sounds that are the pitches. Well, not just that, there's more, but it's like a major concern. Like I don't want to play a pitch that doesn't sound good, right?
I have another thought just from your language thing. If you have the physicality of an instrument will also influence what you can improvise. If you have a fretted instrument, then the amount of distance you can travel with your fingers, or on a keyboard, on another instrument, the physicality of the instrument influences as much as what you can play as the structure or grammar of a language influences of how you say things, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I said it's very important that we keep flexible with our movements. Like the movements of our body are more important than our thoughts in that moment. Right? Against Christian, we worked on that. And it's a little bit like what I did with Mark Sullivan, right? I can't see him here. Maybe he's not here anymore. So, but oh no, there he is. Hi, Mark. So you see, it's very much about the physical ability to actually play, right? So and you know, like when it's kind of interesting also. Something I have observed more and more over the last few years is that there are a lot of people who can play, where people would say, okay, that person can play. And just like with improvisation, right? Like, whereas the question is, like, what really, why would we say that somebody can play? What does that mean, right? What does that even mean?
Usually it's technical.
I don't know. I mean, I guess like nowadays it's mostly technical that people would say that. Yes, yeah, probably.
Able to.
I might not agree with that. I would think they would say you can play because they're finding what you're playing pleasing to their world or their conception of music.
But in some ways, that's the best way to be technical, isn't it? To be able to play the notes that are appealing to people too. So it's a different kind of technicalness, and maybe it's more elusive for a lot of people.
It is sort of elusive in a way, because and this is interesting. Like my, you know, living a life in music for almost 50 years with the intensity that I have practiced it, I get to see the result of practice, or let's just say the result of work, or you could say the result of time spent. I can see that in people when they play, okay? And it has started to be boring for me. It's become boring to me to see somebody play, and all I need to see is, okay, like, okay, you practiced that for 10 years. And now you're presenting that to a bigger audience. And I mean, it's all good, you know, I'm not judging what that person does, but for myself, I'm starting to realize that is not the kind of expression I am personally interested in. I'm more interested in one of us, like Zorin, picking up a trumpet, and he's never played a musical instrument before, and he just blows this like his spit into the trumpet, and it goes like, and it's the most amazing sound I've ever heard, and it gives me goosebumps right now. Like, that's what I'm interested in. Yeah, and I'm not exaggerating. I really mean that. I'm not interested in seeing somebody play like fast bebop, for example. I don't want that. I mean, like, it's boring to me. It's boring to me. Why would you spend, you know, like with bebop, you have to spend your whole life playing fast bebop, right? Why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? Again, not judgmental, but I'm asking myself, why would I want to do that? And I don't want to do that. So that's why, like, in the end, like, we always get back to this point where, like, skill doesn't really matter.
I had an uncle when I was a kid. He's a math professor, and he said he was going to some math convention. And as a wise guy, young kid, I said to him, well, "What do you learn at these math conventions? Different ways that 1 + 1 = 2?" And he said, "No." He gave me an analogy. It stuck with me today. I'm 53 years old now. He said, ABC is to English as 1, 2, 3 is to math. In other words, you know, the mechanics, the basics really have nothing to do, the ABCs with literature, just as 1, 2, 3 doesn't have anything to do with theoretical mathematics and whatnot. And you can say the same thing about music. There's a lot of guitar players out there. It's one of the drivers for me to get interested in another instrument is, you know, I want to do something more. There's a lot of really good players out there. And I think everybody's kind of gone through their phase of being impressed with that. But then at one point, like you said, it becomes boring. There's so much more out there than just being able to play fast or even play well. There's so much more. And that's really what I find interesting.
Yeah, so we're on the same page there, Giovanni. That's kind of like, and that's what I'm talking about, and that's what I was referring to with this meeting here. Like, improvisation as something that is kind of like beyond the idea to recreate, and as like we have heard the definition of it, right? So it's the very definition of it. So as soon as improvisation has a spark of recreation, or recreating something, repeating something, right? Then you could say it loses some of its appeal. But then I also said, and this is important, why don't we make that like a well, not I don't want to say secondary, but like a second primary aim, to also be able to improvise the form. So, like, you could say, like, we have like formlessness on one side and we have form on the other. So why don't we use, you know, this whole range of expression for us? So, okay, so Patrick, you know, sometimes you play the open E string, right? And you know it's an E string, so you know it's an E, right? So if the band plays an E, you play an E, you can play an E, you don't even need to know anything. You play the E string, and that's great. Because then you could play some other notes which you don't know what they're called, and you can always go back to the E, right? So you have your form here, you have the E string, and you have your chaos, and gestural stuff on this side, where you just go, right? And we always have these options, like always. My good friend Tony Levin, right? If he plays the wrong note, what he does is he goes, it's funny. I mean, just pay attention. Like when he's playing a wrong note, he just goes, it's really funny, but it's exactly the same thing. Like if you're like your form, if you lose the form, then go free, right? If you're free, then use some form, right? And you can go back and forth, and it's like this pendulum and this, like this, it's what people call yin and yang, or good and bad, or like that's kind of like what we're dealing with improvisation. Yeah, it's really deep. It's really deep. Yeah. So and what I want to try something. So I want to offer a real workshop. So rather than just these open-ended meetings, which are great, right? It's great, but since like this let's just say this educational business that I'm sort of getting into at this point is something that is kind of attractive also to me, I would say. I would like to try to do a workshop, and I need about 10 people who want to take part. And I could be 10 of you, or even some other people that I try to reach. But I think Soren has a link that he can post in the chat for where you can sign up for this. Okay, so just I'll ask you to consider that. But so it's what have we learned today, if anything? You see, that's the most beautiful silence. It's beautiful. And this is when we could start to actually play a note. Like it's silent. I mean, it's silent because all your mics are muted.
I think we can see musicians have different perspectives on improvisation, and that's actually a good thing. Some people may be more free, maybe some people like a little bit more structure, but it's the interaction of that keeps it alive, and the difference is what makes it interesting.
It sort of reminds me of something that I've just begun to realize in my 50s, is that the older I get, the less I know.
Yeah.
So there's always more to investigate. There's always more to learn, and never stop learning.
Be careful about Alzheimer's, though.
Yeah. So what I find important to note again is that with something like improvisation, we're getting into a field of really basic questions about humanity in a way. It's absolutely true, and the psychology of human beings, and the question is like, is this even something that can be taught? Is the readiness to act within the world, to play a note, is that something that can be practiced? Is that something that can be taught?
There's one thing you didn't talk about precisely in that idea is, do you need to be in a particular state of mind to start an improvisation, or can you do that anytime, any moment, just improvise? Or do you need some preparation? So what comes before the act of improvising, maybe there is something to talk about there.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing, the question I had was, how much of this evening was improvised?
Well, what do you mean?
The conversation that we just had. Did
I'll,
you prepare anything, or did we
yeah,
improvise?
Here's my script.
How much was improvised?
This is my script. I followed the script 100%. Well, I said it, like you can practice improvisation by improvising, right? Yeah. So that's why what I can do, I can be an example, because like we learn by example. That's one way of learning. Yeah. So that would be an approach. So can it be taught? Can improvisation be taught? Yeah, by example.
Well, and I also think that you can engage spontaneity, and if you can find ways for people to release the constructs that hold them from being spontaneous, then by definition, hopefully, you could move forward into improv.
Yes.
I would say that's exactly what we've been doing in our lessons. But, just learning to just let go. So I think it can be taught.
Yeah.
I've been learning it.
Yeah, it can be taught. It can be taught.
Yeah, I was wondering more along the lines too of the structure that you put in place in Oculus, where you have a structure that lays over the ability to compose, and does that create some spontaneousness with the musicians that you're working with in your experience?
Yeah, it's great that you say that, because it does that by restricting them, right? And the restriction, I'm repeating myself again with this little story, like this, my friend Bernhard Wüsteinich that I mentioned before. He used to tell me that, like, when people talk about creativity or something like that, or creativity, and this, like, people think about like a beautiful young woman with a bucket full of red paint, and she's like throwing like paint at the walls, and that's kind of like the idea of a creative person, right? That's like in the media, or that was popular in the media in the 90s or something. But the way that it really is that same lady, on Sunday morning, she would be putting exactly the same strawberry spread on her bread that she puts on her strawberry bread every Sunday morning, right? So that's not really what it's about. It's really, it is the restriction. Like, say that lady is in prison, right, and doesn't have access to a strawberry spread on the Sunday morning. What does she eat on Sunday morning? How does she improvise, to get something that has that, or how does she get to an experience that has that same kind of quality, right? And that's when people get creative. That's when people start improvising, starting to dig a hole, in the and trying to escape, that's creativity. And that's it happens like when there's restriction, right? So that's why also by learning restrictions, or by learning how to impose rules yourself, you learn to be free, of course, right? That's why I used the example, I can't remember who said that, with where you have the I think it was Chris, the three paths that you could take, right? Where the road forks are, right, into three paths. And yeah, I mean, as a non-skilled improviser, right, you would be sitting there and saying, should I take, that road, or this one, like 1, 2, or 3? Well, I don't know, like, 3 looks a little more attractive here, but then like, which one should I take, right? Like, then you can actually roll a die, and the die will tell you where to go. So practicing, like, to internally roll the die is to learn to improvise, or to learn to be free, right? So there you go. So it's the actual opposite of freedom. Like, you're giving power to a cube, right, to decide what you should be doing. And this will actually be part of the workshop, right? So it's extremely powerful. Looking at how to make ourselves, or like somebody used like the state of mind we're in. I don't know who asked that, like JP probably, right? Like it's yeah, of course there is a certain state of mind that allows for spontaneous action. Yeah. And there's, you know, there's also some other states of mind that kind of like paralyze you, right? Yeah. And there we go. It's a very, very deep and basic psychological question. Like, how can we make ourselves free to do anything? And then maybe something. But the first step is to do anything. That's also what Mark referred to. Like at first, we'll learn to do anything. And then, as we already know what we want, we can turn anything into something. Okay, so this is seems to be like a good moment to end it. I'm really, really grateful that you all were here and we had this conversation. It was also good that to experiment with actually having more of you actually talk rather than just me lecturing. So yeah, and I hope to see you again throughout this year. In a few weeks, we will have like a more traditional Living the Dream event with Pat Mastelotto and his wife Deborah Mastelotto. We're going to talk about their new album. I'm going to do some listening sessions together where we, like, the idea is we listen to an album together, and there will be some sort of live commentary for that. So this will be the format of the free Living the Dream meeting, and then I will also try this idea with the workshops. Right. So, and I'm going to share, or maybe Soreen can share the link again for the workshop, and I will also announce it in the newsletter. And yeah, I thank you very much. And you can always write to me. You should always write to me. Don't necessarily expect an answer right away because I'm very busy with family at the moment. So, but please never hesitate to write to me. And yeah, let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Sounds great, Marcus. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, everybody.
This was really great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.